Welcome to another edition of Doctor to Doctor in the chat room, D2D. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Shaw, and I am glad to be with you another Saturday and just to provide you with some information about domestic violence, another issue that plagues our world and our communities. I said on my first show that people have always asked me, what is your show going to be about? And I said, everything. And I still stick to that because what my goal here is to have a platform in which I can share important information such as the topic that we're going to cover today with you, and that we can become more aware and know that we can have something and resources and information to help us get through these things. So glad to have you again, and we're going to move forward. I have Miss Gwen with me today, and she's going to tell you a little bit about herself. But as I said, we're going to talk about domestic violence. I have a few statistics here about domestic violence, and these are national statistics from the National Statistics Domestic Violence Fact Sheet. It says that on average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. That equates to 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men. And they actually experience severe intimate partner physical violence, intimate partner contact sexual violence, and or intimate partner stalking with impacts such as injury, fearfulness, post-traumatic stress disorder, use of victim services, contraction of sexually transmitted diseases, and so forth and so on. And it also says that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced some type of physical violence by an intimate partner. 1 in 7 of these women and 1 in 25 men have been injured by an intimate partner. 1 in 10 women have been raped by an intimate partner. And there was no data available for the male victims, but it says that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 women have been victims of severe physical violence. And that an example of that would be like beating, burning, strangling, and so forth by an intimate partner in their lifetime. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 18 men have been stalked by an intimate partner during their lifetime, at which point they felt fearful for their lives. On a typical day, there are more than 20,000 phone calls placed to the domestic violence hotline nationwide. So with that said, Gwen, first I want you to just introduce yourself to our audience, and then we'll just jump in from there. Okay? Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This is
Absolutely.
my passion. This is what I do.
Yeah.
And I am Gwen Turner. Most people know that when I go out and introduce myself, my tagline is I am that bold and beautiful survivor of domestic violence. And I say that boldly and proudly. Bold because I'm almost 60 years old, and y'all know I'm rocking this purple
beautiful.
hair.
Yes.
Okay. And I wear purple for domestic violence.
Yes.
And beautiful because of all the things that I have been through. I was in a very toxic relationship for well over 20 years.
Wow.
Off and on. And with most of the things that I went through and endured during that time and had to keep to myself. I keep a mirror in every room in my house. So, because I can walk by and say, oh, what a beautiful specimen God made and God preserved, even through all of the things that I went through.
Yes.
And professionally, I'm a domestic violence advocate.
Wow.
I work for the Crime Victims Rape Crisis Center, and I also have my own foundation, Corinthian Hope House, where I try and help women and children and men who are experiencing some form of domestic violence.
So, domestic violence is often thought of as physical abuse. And I did talk a little bit about some of those other things that are happening in terms of the statistics that I laid out. But talk about the many forms of domestic violence and what people see.
And you are so right. Most people, when you say domestic violence, they think of the hitting, kicking, spitting,
Yeah.
and things of that nature, the physical part. But you have a religious abuse. You can't go to that church because I don't like that pastor. You can't be a part of that denomination because I was raised a part of this denomination. That's religious abuse. Financial abuse. You know, we may be married or we may share a bank account, whatever the case may be, but you can't write a check unless I say you can write a check, or you need to call me every time the debit card, is being used before you. I don't care how much. You're only allotted to do $5 over whatever I'm allowing you to use weekly. So there's financial abuse. Then there is the elder abuse, which still comes into play a lot of times when you're thinking about relationships, when you have that spring-summer relationship where there is an older person in the relationship and a younger person, but they are intimate. And then a lot of times we've seen where that younger partner will take advantage just because of the age of the person. So you have, and then there are other kinds of elder abuse that appears in domestic violence. So there are many forms of domestic violence, and a lot of times when I go and do seminars, especially to young people, I always say if there's a gut feeling in you and it doesn't feel right, then you may need to investigate that because that may be some form of abuse. So anything that makes you feel uncomfortable for whatever reason could be a form of abuse, especially if it's something that's happening on a continuous basis.
And it becomes domestic because there is an intimate relationship. Okay.
And also it can become domestic with siblings.
Right.
I mean, we often talk about domestic violence and you think about the intimate part. But you got to think about even just within the household, siblings, mother, daughter, father, son, father, daughter. All of those can be domestic.
Okay. So when I think about, say, child molestation, I've often heard that these children are groomed, the victim the victimizer grooms the victim. And is that how it happens with domestic violence? How does it actually begin?
I tell people all the time, in my opinion, domestic violence, for every domestic violent relationship, especially intimate partner, there is a different route that a person takes.
Okay.
Now, I will admit, in every case, the abuser has a target person. And when they see that they can get you mentally, because it starts with a mental and control thing.
Right. And
It's
so
a
I guess
control
for
thing.
me, I just don't imagine that somebody just starts off that way.
Oh,
you
absolutely
know what I mean?
not. It never starts
Right.
that way.
Okay.
It never starts that way. And I always use my personal experience. I was 7 years into the relationship before I realized that I was in a domestic violent relationship. First of all, I came from a household where there was a mother and a father. Before they were deceased, they would have been married 61 years. So I never saw fighting. I never saw that. I never heard my mom call my dad out his name. I never saw any of that. My sister, her husband, my brothers, their wives, never saw that. So I probably had never even used the word domestic violence. Then here I am. I've been in a relationship 7 years, but I had no clue. Didn't know the red flags. Didn't know the signs. So when he was keeping me away from other people, so let's family, friends, say, oh, I'm going to the movies with the girls tonight. Oh no, let's go to dinner at Ruth Chris.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you like that better? So, and as that continued to go on, I still had no clue because in my mind, keep in mind when I met him, I was 17. We officially started to date probably when I was 20. So in my mind, I'm thinking I'm the best thing that has happened to this man since sliced bread and Jesus Christ. So, and he was older, so I'm thinking, okay, this is a great thing. He wants to be with me. He only wants me to be with him. Another thing is the way you dress, commenting on the way you dress. He started buying my clothes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there were a lot of things that I just had no clue of.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was no reason for me to have to go out and buy this and do that because he would have already taken care of those things.
Mm-hmm.
I still did not understand
And
at
it
that
felt
time.
very endearing when it was
Absolutely.
happening. Okay.
Absolutely. I could not see the separation
Mm-hmm.
in it and where he was separating me from my family, separating me from my friends. And I would tell people it had gotten to the point that I didn't breathe any air that he didn't breathe.
Mm-hmm.
But still, I'm thinking, oh, he loves me.
Right.
He really loves me,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But that was part of the plan. I always, when I tell my story, I tell people he planned his work and worked his plan.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no cookie cutter type thing. But
Mm-hmm.
there are signs that women and men should look for. The separation, the control, the tone of voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree, you know, a lot of people say if you're gonna marry someone, you need to see them mad before you get married. I think that applies in relationships as well. You know, you need to see how far that anger will go. And a lot of times we need to look beyond our heart and really see what's going on. And that's something that happens to a lot of victims, and we as a community will sometimes get angry. And I know I'm going on, but a lot of times we get upset because they go back.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell people all the
Right.
time, you cannot get upset because you cannot always help who you fall in love with.
Mm-hmm.
And once I realized I was in a domestic violence relationship, there were days and times I knew I needed to leave.
Were
But
you
my
in
heart,
this field prior to this, or did this transition you into the field?
no, the ironic part about it is that while in the middle of the relationship, I was hired to work at the YWCA Abused Women's Shelter.
Wow.
No one had a clue. None of my coworkers, nobody, had a clue that I was doing intake on women to get to a safe place. And I was being beat at that time at least once a week.
Wow.
Nobody had a clue. A lot of times victims are the best actresses and actors and makeup artists in the world. And then abusers carry a great talent, especially mine. He was known as the Gentle Giant.
Wow.
He was a pastor.
Wow.
So to the world, we were picture pretty. We really were. We
Yeah.
looked good together. We did great things together
Yeah.
publicly. And he did great things for the community and other people. It's just that he had an issue with abuse.
Right. So, what would you say some of the patterns are, common patterns that you've seen with people that you've helped?
The most common pattern is the control component. I mean, you just can't get past that.
Okay.
And most abusers, and I would go as far to say all abusers, they can't get past that thing of, I've got to control you.
So
It's
do
got to
they
be
have?
my way or the highway. But now they may not control you with an iron hand like that.
Okay.
Like for instance, with mine, you don't want to go to the movies with the girls.
Right.
You want to go to Ruth Chris. This is a 5-star restaurant. Oh no, you don't want to go to the homecoming at UAPP. I got a surprise trip to Hawaii.
Wow.
So it does not always have to be that, you know, no you can't, no you can't. It's the subtle things. So you have to keep in mind, and I would admonish, and even as I admonish to my clients now, no, always remember what makes you happy. Always watch that compromise. Of course, there's a compromise in every relationship, but watch that compromise. Are you compromising more? Are you giving more in this than you are getting? So watch out for your level of happipiness.
Deposits and withdrawals.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
do you find that there is usually something going on with the abuser, like in their background? Is there like, have they been abused many times?
Sometimes.
Okay.
A lot of people will go as far as to say, especially when it comes to victims, they draw what they saw. I never saw it, so that was not my case. But with everybody and with the abuser, one of the pieces of homework that I had to do, because I got counseling immediately after I got out of the relationship. And one of the things that, one of my assignments was to investigate what went on in his childhood or in his background that would cause him to be like that.
Okay.
Some abusers have been abused. With my abuser, his whole thing was he didn't view his mother as the perfect mother. There were men around the house a lot. She died when he was a teenager. The examples that he saw of other women, which would have been his aunt and his grandmother, he did not understand.
Okay.
And I say that because they were both married to alcoholics. So they would have to steal money from their spouses on Fridays. But they didn't steal the money because they were thieves. They stole the money because there were 8 children in the house.
Yes.
And had they not gotten the money out, then there would be no food to cook. The rent would not be paid.
Right.
But he could not see that.
Yeah.
So his whole concept was, no woman is ever going to take advantage of me.
Right.
All women are nothing. All women cheat. All women, so because that's the example he saw, and he never got closure in that, and he never quite got the understanding of why his grandmother and his aunt did the things that they did.
Okay.
So there is a reason behind it, but you just have to find what that reason are. Some of them have been abused because not only do I work with victims, I do work with some abusers as well. But sometimes it is because of previous abuse, or they saw, I have a dear friend who's a former abuser now.
Okay.
And he works with abusers. And his thing was his daddy did it, his uncle did it, his brothers did it.
It's what you're supposed to do.
It's what you're supposed to do. He had no clue that beating women was wrong until he went to college.
So we're gonna come back after break, and we're gonna talk a little bit about some challenges that come along with domestic violence. We will be right back on 94.7 FM.